A reading from the first letter of St. Peter. Beloved, if you are patient when you suffer for doing what is good, this is a grace before God. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, and you should follow his footsteps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When he was insulted, he returned no insult. When he suffered, he did not threaten. Instead, he handed himself over to the one who judges justly. He himself bore our sin in his body upon the cross, so that, free from sin, we might live for righteousness. By his wound you have been healed, for you have gone astray like sheep. But you have now returned to the shepherd and the guardian of your souls. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
St. Peter reminds us that from the journey from the waters of baptism to the time when we close our eyes to the face of the earth, we have to undergo hardship. And this is very obvious in the words of Jesus. If you want to follow me, take up your cross and follow in my footsteps. St. Peter reminds us that Jesus suffered so that he will leave us an example how to live our Christian calling. He reminds us also that he who is Christ suffered in the hands of the unjust, but he threw himself in the hands of the one who judged justly. And that's why on the cross he said, "Into your hands, Father, I commend my spirit." St. Peter also reminds us that Jesus suffered without opening his mouth, like a lamb in front of the one who was slaughtered. He didn't insult, he didn't threaten, but he took everything in patiently, because this was the will of the Father, that he will become victim and a priest on the hill of Calvary. And nailed on that cross, he assumed our sin. He nailed that sin of ours to that cross. And from that cross, salvation has come to us. He also reminds us of the wounds of Jesus. For those who came to the vigil of Easter, after we blessed the fire and the opening of the church there, then we decorate the Paschal candle. And that's what we say. By his wound, we have been healed. And those are the 5 wounds, the hands, the feet, and the side of Jesus. And that's why he said to us, we were like sheep going astray, but the shepherd returned us to the flock, and he is the one who guides us, and he will guard our souls to the land of the living. This is the message of St. Peter, and this is the message for us to remind ourselves as we celebrate these days of Easter, that the Lord Jesus was sent from heaven with one, as we say, command, that he will immolate himself, offer himself on the hill of Calvary for the salvation of sin. Many times when we see suffering in the world, we say, if God is so good, why he allowed suffering? He allowed suffering because suffering was the means by which his Son, who is God like a Father, saved the world. It is in suffering that we come to realize and appreciate life. It is in suffering that we come to really identify ourselves with the cross of Jesus. It is in suffering that we come to understand that that suffering is the purification of each one of us. Sometimes God permits those things to happen to remind us and to bring us back where we're supposed to be. How many times I found people, and there's not just once or second or third stunt, but every time that I encounter people who are away from God in time of distress, in time of pain, in time of suffering, that they make a promise that they will come back, that they will change, that they will become more closer to the Lord Jesus. My dear people, the suffering is nothing to, the suffering is not suffering in itself, but suffering is, as St. Paul said, and we conclude with those words of St. Paul, we continue in our bodies what is missing in the passion of Christ. I mean, if people say, what is missing in the suffering of Christ? Christ is still building his church. Christ is still moving on the church to her day, the day when the Lord will come, the day of judgment. And so he is preparing the church. And St. Paul said he will present her without no blemish, no wrinkle, and beauty, like a bride waiting to meet her groom. This is why St. Peter reminds us that we are now in the hands of the guardian. The guardian who is going to guard us and lead us to our destination. May the words of St. Peter be for us an inspiration to understand that even sometimes in those hard times and hard days we have in this life, remind me and remind all of us that that is the time that we know that God is close to us. You say, why? Because that is the time that although Jesus felt that the Father has left him, is the time that the union have come again with the Father. When he put his hands, he put his life, he put himself in the hands of the Father. How can he be away from the Father when the Father and himself, they are one? My dear, let us ask God to forgive us for many times in our suffering, instead of turning to him and ask him to really show us what is missing in our life, to perfect our life in his way, sometimes we go against him and question even his love. God so loved the world that he gave us his Son. And he gave us the Son so that he will be for us an exemplar, so that we can follow him. As he was the first Christian, we too are Christians, not only by name, but by actions and by life that we live. So this life that we live on earth, which few moments ago you say, a valley of tears, will lead us one day to the fullness of joy. God bless.